Cinema is the great dream factory where skilled filmmakers can bring their most ambitious ideas to life and entertain millions of people at the same time. And as much as we all definitely love movies, there's also no denying that sometimes directors don't take enough care to preserve the illusion of authenticity. This can happen any number of ways, and often occurs in its simplest form by simply not obeying the basic rules of the world around us. Perhaps characters commonly behave in ways that an actual human being never would, or the production cut corners and in turn stripped a character of something that drew immediate attention to itself. Whatever the reason, these 10 commonplace movie happenings can drive us up the wall, leaving us to question why anyone thought viewers were dumb enough to accept it, and why a mega-budget production felt it could skimp on the fundamentals. Most of these things are so cliché and commonplace these days that they immediately elicit either groans or laughs or both, and filmmakers are firmly advised to avoid committing these egregious sins. Unless they're parodying them, of course. Also, credit to the fine folk at our movies for inspiring this video with their discussion on the subject. I'm Gareth, this is What Culture, and here are 10 things that happen in movies that piss you off. Number 10. Driving while not looking at the road. Even basic driving scenes are much more complicated to film than you might think, at least in a way that's even remotely convincing. While technically it boils down to simply placing the actors inside a car and either rear projecting the view outside the car or compositing it with a green screen, so much of the driver's behavior will dictate how believable the scene actually is. Literally, countless movies will have the character driving the car turn away from the road for seconds at a time to talk to their passengers, as would of course present a massive safety risk in real life. I would be hanging on for dear life. This was hilariously parodied in Dumb and Dumber, where during a limo run, Lloyd turns around and tells his passenger Mary she's more statistically likely to be killed on her way to the airport, all while cars collide and explode in front of him. But in serious movies, it can quickly annihilate the audience's immersion, as they're reminded in neon signposted fashion that these characters are not in fact driving along an actual road, but parked in a hermetically sealed studio. And this is without even getting into characters who continually fiddle with the steering wheel while clearly driving in a straight line. Ugh. While we're talking about driving, I want to know right now, what is your favorite driving scene in a movie? Is it a chase or just a compelling conversation? Whatever it is, you let me know in the comments section down below. Number 9. Drinking from blatantly empty cups. This one will drive you mad once you know about it, and you'll be unable to not notice it in movies and TV shows for the rest of your life. So you're welcome. Whenever a character is drinking from a mug or cup, typically while consuming coffee, tea, or water, the actor usually won't actually have any liquid in the vessel. And to anyone who basically appreciates the weight of a liquid-filled cup, it looks immediately off. Add on top of this the hollow sound when the container is placed on a table, and actors' oft painful attempts to pretend they're swallowing down non-existent liquid, and it becomes an infuriating comedy of errors. While actors understandably may not want to drink cups and cups of liquid while shooting a scene, could a crew member really not place a weighted object of some kind in the mug? Like just anything? The phenomenon is widespread enough and has annoyed so many people that there's even a subreddit, That Cup Is Empty, devoted to chronicling it. So go and have some fun and dive into that empty cup once you're done here. Oh, I love the internet. Number 8. Nobody ever says goodbye on the phone. So movies are notoriously terrible at depicting realistic phone conversations. From the fact that nobody ever overlaps with or interrupts anybody else, whether due to poor manners or a spotty connection, and nobody ever says goodbye. How rude. Look at just about any movie phone call, and the characters will typically hang up the phone without any sort of parting salutation, as though it's the most natural thing in the world. It's not. In real life, this would be considered pretty damn rude, right? And while it's generally done in the name of efficient storytelling, it does nevertheless remind us that we're watching something detached, however subtly, from reality. If this happened in real life, there's a good chance you'd assume the connection had been dropped, or at least think the hanger-upper was being rather impolite. Seriously, are those precious 2 seconds of saved screen time really worth the strange, immersion-shattering effect they generate in audiences? I don't think so. Number 7. Knocking someone out is no big deal. If you take cinema's depiction depiction of violence as gospel, then you'll believe that gunshots instantly kill people most of the time, especially if they're bad guys. It's totally safe to be within 20 feet of gigantic explosions, and knocking someone out is no biggie at all. People get punched and kicked unconscious all the time in action movies, to the point that it's basically distorted humanity's conception of what being knocked out is, most of us having thankfully not experienced it for ourselves. For starters, hitting someone with enough force to knock them out has a good chance of damaging the attacker's own hands, especially if they don't know how to throw a proper punch, and so firing a flurry of fists at your target could break your hand, or at least leave it horribly bruised and unusable for a few days, and nobody wants that. But for the victim, well, things are much more dire. Cinema typically shows people waking up from being knocked out with no lasting effects whatsoever, despite the fact that it represents a huge danger in reality. For starters, if someone punches you out in real life, there's a good chance they're not going to have the courtesy to then cushion your fall, meaning you may simply hit your head on the ground and suffer a potentially fatal head injury. That's without ignoring the possibility you're hitting the wrong part of your skull and just die instantly from the impact, which is much more common than any movie will ever tell you. Beyond that, there's the massive risk of brain damage due to hypoxia, which is a loss of oxygen, and myriad other complications, such as the brain swelling due to the impact and putting the victim in a coma. We could honestly go on forever, but the point is that hitting someone hard enough to render them unconscious isn't the badass frivolity it appears in cinema. And it's also way harder than it looks unless you're specially trained. I'd recommend just not trying it. Number 6, everyone has perfect hair no matter what. This is a big bugbear in post-apocalyptic movies in particular, where no matter how bleak or treacherous the setting might be, the cast members still look impossibly sexy. Take Dune, where even when he's skulking around in the desert, Paul Atreides has a perfectly coiffed mane of hair. Despite being exposed to the extremely harsh climate of inhospitable planet Arrakis, he looks about ready to go out on a hot date. I can't even get my bald head to look sexy in Manchester. On the female side, women in post-apocalyptic films are also clearly still wearing makeup, and have made over-the-odds efforts to beautify themselves with virtually no underarm or leg hair in sight. This isn't to say that people will totally abandon their grooming rituals when the world goes to hell, but it'd surely become much less of a priority, right? Especially when factoring in a scarcity of resources. You're not really going to care about your leg hair then. At the end of the day, it's a compromise on the part of filmmakers. Movie studios know that audiences are drawn to physically attractive people, and when they're dropping a cool $165 million on a lavish, ambitious sci-fi blockbuster, they don't want to give viewers any additional reasons to stay away. Implausibly hot post-apocalyptic heroes are the price paid for said movies existing in the first place, basically. It's still annoying, but such are the economics. If you're having fun with this list of things that piss movie fans off, then check out some more What Culture videos on the channel and hit subscribe if you haven't already. Hopefully those videos won't piss you off, but we'll see. Number 5, hilariously unrealistic PG-13 sex scenes. Sex scenes are always tricky to pull off, because even when you've got a permissive R rating, there are a lot of concerns to deal with, namely the comfort of your cast members and where the line is drawn between meaningful portrayal and salacious exploitation. This becomes even trickier and more potentially laughable in the PG-13 arena, where filmmakers are heavily restricted on what they can show. Generally speaking, sexualized nudity, that is, a woman's breasts or genitals of either sex, will instantly get you an R rating, and so PG-13 sex scenes tend to be comically unrealistic, tasteful affairs. Some of the more ridiculously risible clichés include a bedsheet being used to obscure offending body parts, or the writhing bodies being strategically posed to conceal them. And then there's underworld evolution, oh boy, the gold standard of infuriatingly unbelievable sex scenes, where the rutting between Kate Beckinsale and Scott Speedman is somehow rendered hysterical because their nether regions aren't even remotely lined up. It looks like he's aiming for a stomach. What is going on? Number 4, coughing as shorthand for terminal illness. There are few movie clichés more agonizingly exhausted than having a character cough violently to quickly signify that they've got a terminal ailment of some kind. Extra cringe is awarded if they cough blood into a rag and then show the remnants to the camera, as if to hammer the point home for the cheap seats, and assure audiences that this person right here won't be leaving the movie alive. Above all else, it's just incredibly lazy from a filmmaking perspective, and such a worn-out trope at this point in time that anyone who still earnestly uses it should go straight to directing jail. Throw away the key while you're at it. In the same ballpark is the tendency for women to only vomit as shorthand for pregnancy, because in the world of cinema, food poisoning and excess alcohol consumption apparently just don't exist for the ladies. Weird. Number 3, nobody finishes their food or drinks. Filming scenes where people are eating or drinking can be a logistical nightmare, because there's a need to maintain continuity of how much food and drink are in front of each character during the course of a scene, typically filmed over many takes. This is why you'll so often see characters simply push food around their plate for the duration of a scene while talking, to give the impression they're partaking in the ritual called dinner, albeit without actually eating any of it and creating a massive continuity headache. But far more annoying is the fact that nobody ever seems to actually finish a meal in movies. Are people not hungry? A husband might be eating breakfast with his wife, and as soon as the scene's dialogue has been exhausted, he'll kiss said wife on the cheek, insist he's late, and then leave with half a plate full of egg, bacon, and sausage. Beyond being totally rude to whoever lovingly cooked this meal for you, it's just insanely wasteful. I mean, what the hell? Drinks are much better, especially in bars where characters will up and leave the watering hole once there's no more dialogue left, frequently leaving behind almost an entire pint of beer or glass of wine at the same time. At least down your drink before you go, right? It's damn expensive a pint these days. Number 2, CPR is surprisingly successful and has no side effects. If you take movie CPR at face value, it's an extremely reliable method of bringing someone back from the brink of death without any lasting issues whatsoever. The overwhelming majority of the time, CPR will successfully revive an imperiled heroic character. But in reality, CPR that's performed outside of a hospital by an untrained person has as low odds as 1.9% of bringing someone back to life. Beyond this, CPR is rarely shown to have any adverse side effects at all, such as brain damage caused by being without oxygen for several minutes, or broken ribs as a result of vigorous chest compressions. For the most part, anyone revived through CPR in a movie will cough and gasp for a few moments, maybe spit up some water, and basically be as good as new. Two of the more memorable outrageous examples include Ethan Hunt reviving after being fatally electrocuted a few minutes earlier in Mission Impossible 3, and a certain character in Netflix's Fear Street movies getting CPR'd back to life after receiving massive stab wounds. Okay then. Number 1, cutting a hand to draw blood. Pretty much any time a character is required to draw blood in a movie, whether to fulfill a pact or for other plot-related reasons, they'll use a blade to cut their open palm. It is a howling visual cliche at this point, and has been for many years now. Yet it's surprisingly still used so commonly in movies. Beyond being a tired trope, it just makes no sense at all. Your hand is one of the most useful and versatile parts of your body, such that it's an extremely silly location from which to create a prominent cut. There are 17,000 touch receptors and 3 nerve endings in a palm, marking them incredibly sensitive to pain. There are far meatier, less sensitive areas of the body to draw blood in a pinch, none of which will be nearly as debilitating as cutting your hand, but people still keep going for the palm. Oh boy.